Hello, thank you for joining me today on episode 4 of What to Expect When Buying Your Home. I'm here with Mr. James Dean of Keller Williams Client's Choice in Woodland Park. James, how's it going?
Hey, pretty good, Weston. How you doing today?
I can't complain, man. I think you're doing a little better than me though with that view
Oh
behind you.
yeah.
That that is quite the view. My goodness, I am stuck in Highlands Ranch. So I mean it's doing all right, but that is not that view. Goodness sakes. But man, thank you for joining me. Did you get an award recently? Where'd you tell me about that award, man? I got to hear about it again. What was that about?
Yeah. See, now you're gonna embarrass me now that we're recording. So yeah.
Caught you off guard. I know. I
Yeah.
got to talk about it. Come on, I got to let
Yep.
people know I know important people.
Yeah. So I've actually gotten two recently. I got top 10%, so Pikes Peak producer award recently, and then also found out that my first 12 months as a real estate agent, which actually ended last March. I actually had the highest gross sales of all new agents within Keller Williams in Colorado. So I got Rookie of the Year for all of Colorado for Keller Williams as well.
Rookie of the year. So you're pretty much like up there with Jordan, right? Because he got rookie of the year too, huh?
I wish. I think he got a little bit better of a bonus than I did. So
It's all in due time. I don't think he got his first
yeah.
championship until year 4 or 5. So you got time still. So no, good for you, man. That's incredible. And so Pikes Peak. So you're servicing, Woodland Park area, Colorado Springs. What
Yep.
ar- what other areas is that?
Yeah, so primarily the Teller County, a little bit of the eastern portion of Park County also. So pretty much centralized around the north side of Pikes Peak, all the way down to Cripple Creek and out to Guffey. And those are my niche areas because I live up here,
Uh-huh.
obviously, as well. But I also service and have done a lot of business down in Colorado Springs, all the way up to Monument, Black Forest. And I've actually got another agent on my team who lives down in the Black Forest area, and her primary niche is the North Colorado Springs area and
Okay.
all the way up to Castle Rock. And then she actually does a little bit of business down in the Pueblo area too. Not a whole lot, but a little bit of business down there.
Pueblo. Okay. Well, that's incredible. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me today, man. Got a couple of things I want to run by you. It's hopefully you can help my buyers out there with their future endeavors of buying a home. So really the topic today is what to expect when buying a home or your first home. So, take it away. Tell me everything there is to know and what they can expect.
Absolutely. And I have this conversation with my buyers, usually the first, if not the first, definitely the second conversation with them, especially if they're a first time home buyer, because buying a home can be a very scary process. It's probably the most expensive purchase they've ever made in their entire lives. If
Absolutely.
it's their first purchase. So walking them through and educating them through that so that they understand the steps is super important because our job is to advise on it's not to make decisions for them, but it's to provide all the information that we would want to know to be able to make the same decisions that they are as well, and to make them as comfortable as possible when making those decisions. So when you're starting off and you're thinking about buying your first home, one of the most important factors that needs to be figured out, and this is right in your lane lesson, is they got to know what they can afford.
Yep.
Because there's no point in going out and looking at $3 million homes when all you can afford is a $500,000 home
Yep.
on there because you're wasting your time. And you'll get to that point later on in life, where you can get bigger homes. But this is your first home. This is your starter home. It's not your forever home, more than likely. It's getting your foot in the door, which
Right.
really is vital, especially when you look at what we're seeing happen right now with inflation and everything else that's happened with the market. Housing could be one of the best places to have the majority of your nest egg. And
Yeah.
most millionaires have or own a home.
Yep.
And that was the start of the process on
Yeah.
there as well.
And it's
So I
not
mean,
fun for me. It's not fun for me either for you all to go look at some $1.5 million gorgeous home, and then you guys call me like, "Hey, ready to submit this offer," and I'm like, "Oh, I got some bad news. Don't quite qualify for this property." And now I'm the bad guy, and I'm the one getting yelled at. So no,
and
I
and
appreciate that.
and I'll caveat on that too. I'm not saying that a new home buyer can't afford something like that because there are home buyers that can,
Oh, absolutely.
absolutely can. They've moved a lot, they've rented a lot, and they just didn't want to, invest in that area. And now they're finally settling in, but they just never purchased a home. So there's those folks out there as well.
Oh, absolutely. But there's also a big difference between 2 million and 1.5.
Yeah.
So we
Yep.
definitely want to make sure we've got that ironed out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a big difference sometimes between a $50,000 difference and a $25,000
Yeah,
difference also.
yeah,
So, and
absolutely.
that's in as we go through this process too, and this is something that comes up quite a bit because it's hard not to get so just intent and hyper focused on the interest rate. And I'm bringing up the elephant in the room today because we have higher interest rates than we have for the last few
Yeah,
years. Folks get so focused on the interest rate that the thing you need to look at is can you afford it
yeah,
on there on those monthly payments, and if you can, getting your foot in that door is super important because once your foot's in that door, you're playing the game. You're going to be able to start your upgrades when you can. When you move, it's easier to get back and forth as you sell and buy and do different homes and different move ups or move downs depending on where you're going, but you have to have your foot in the door to begin with. So if it's affordable, interest rates can always change. You know, it's
yeah,
you marry the house, you date the interest rate. You hear that
yeah.
so often out there. So refinances are out there as available tools as well. And then once folks typically kind of get to where they can kind of understand that, because things that typically happen is we get high interest rates and renting might not be bad right now, but those interest rates as investors and other people purchase homes,
Yeah.
and those are homes that you're renting, those will absolutely correlate to what your rent's going to be in the next couple of years. It's
Yep.
just not an immediate feel on
Yep.
that as well. Whereas when you buy a home, you've got your payment, that's your payment. Nobody's going to raise the rent on you anymore with that also.
Hmm.
So we walk them through the entire process of what that looks like. If they're FHA or VA, those are very common in our area to see, especially the VA with all the military that we have
Yep.
down here as well. And I'm retired military myself, so I've got full on experience with doing that with VA loans personally and with the PCSs because we just retired a few years out here out of Fort Carson. And the FHAs are fairly similar as well. They've got different limit rates based on where they're looking as well. But that process is very similar, but it's super important to get that moving from the very beginning and get that pre-qual, that pre-approval in there. And pre-approvals really today are going to be king over a pre-qual with an offer that's being made as well. So I explain to my folks the difference between that. But since I've got you here, I'm going to let you explain the difference between a pre-qual and a pre-approval since those come from you
Yeah.
regardless.
Yeah, and this has been a really big topic of mine recently, because I don't know if you've seen some of the videos I've done recently, but I've had people wanting to possibly try to get pre-approvals out there without credit pulls and without docs, and I'm just no, I can't do it. I'm sorry. And so, and the reason why, you and I understand, but the reason why people sometimes want to hold off on that is because of it's the only thing that expires, right? So let me back up actually. So pre-qual versus pre-approval. Pre-qualification is really just app in, right? We've seen the application. The pre-approval is the actual verification behind the documents and the credit report pull. So once we have all those things, that means we have verified the pre-qual or the application, and they are ready to go. And also, too, some lenders like myself, not all, but like myself, I run everyone through an AUS system, an automated underwriting system, and that's going to tell us, it's going to give us all the flags if there are any. It's going to give us approve eligible, approve ineligible, or ineligible, ineligible. And it's going to let us know, hey, there are some issues with this, and we cannot run that until we pull credit. So
Yep.
those the pre-approval. So back to my point, I mean, we've got to do that stuff. We can't be handing out pre-approvals because that's a false document. And not only can that get myself in trouble, get you into trouble, and get them in trouble, and we got to make sure that we're always getting that credit pull. And it's big, and that's why. Correct me if I'm wrong, but these pre-quals versus pre-approvals are also really important, is because these real estate agents and these sellers are going to know the difference. And when you
Yep.
submit that pre-qual, I mean, at this point in this day and age, especially after the COVID market we had, I mean, pre-quals essentially, unfortunately, got thrown out the window. I mean, no one's going to
Yeah.
really entertain them anymore because they want to know that you are good to go. They don't want surprises later, especially with the fact that a lot of sellers are looking for their next home as well. So they need
Yep.
to know, hey, this deal is going to get done, because we're also buying our next home. So just like you all are trying to buy our home for your next home, we're trying to find our next home to wherever it is we're going. So
Exactly.
yeah, that's a really really good point.
Yeah, and then bringing it in on the agent side, and just to kind of give some perspective to new buyers out there. when I'm a listing agent and I'm helping sellers out, and you're exactly right, Weston. COVID completely flipped the books on this. People used to get away with pre-quals, and we've even got contingencies in there for the conditional loan approval, all that stuff that kind of comes through on that. So we've got two contingency deadlines that we're looking at for financing on a purchase in Colorado. That first one is usually within 3 days of going under contract. That's when most folks are going to lock in their interest rates. But the difference is before COVID, folks didn't have to get a pre-approval. It was kind of like getting that letter in the mail for MasterCard saying you're pre-qualified for a
Yeah.
$10,000 credit card, and you never even asked for it. You never submitted an application. They're just basically pulling it off random public data on there. And then if you apply, you find out, oh, I'm not actually qualified for 10,000. I'm qualified for 5,000.
Yeah.
So, and that's when you get the approval process going. A pre-approval is super important to sellers because they know that that buyer has gone through that initial underwriting period on there, and essentially now they're just waiting for the home that's going to link up for that underwriting, and the underwriting is going to finalize, but they're already so much further ahead. So if you were to go out there and you were going to sell your home, if you were on the other side, you would want the person that's more qualified. And with the lack of inventory that we had across the United States as a whole, and especially here within Colorado, it really drove people to have that pre-approval before a seller was even going to consider that offer. And it comes right back down to the joke of, like, hey, we need to talk to a lender first to find out what you can afford, because the seller's thinking the same thing. If someone gives me a pre-qual, this person could be offering me $1 million for my home I've got listed for 500,000, means nothing to me without a pre-approval or cash to back that up or anything else along those lines. It's just
Right.
smoke and mirrors at that point. So we walk people through that process, and it's really important to, and I tell all my folks this as well. This is why a local lender such as yourself, Weston, is so important. Also, so many transactions that we have that happen within the real estate community do not happen in normal banking hours. They happen after hours. They happen on the weekends. And when you have a listing agent, and we've gotten very savvy with being able to find out who's going to be good team players, because when we go under contract, we're all working together as a team to make it to closing. And there's obviously different caveats to that because we have to make it through inspection. It has to meet the buyer's needs as well, just to make sure we're not just going to make it to closing just to make it to closing. It's got to meet all the different parameters that could go to that. But the professionals on the side, we're working together as a team to make sure it's nothing on our side that's going to keep that house from closing within that time frame. And we're not going to stop that if we can do it any way, shape, or form. And when you deal with some of these bigger banks, I mean, they just don't care as much anymore, and they're just hard to get a hold of on the weekends and during the after hours. So, and that's part of what I do, and done it many times at you, Weston. When we're submitting offers, and we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit here, but when we're submitting offers, I'm letting the buyers know, okay, we've got the offer completed, we got it ready. I'm already texting Weston. We've already had conversations on this to make sure we're both on the same sheet of paper on this as well. And I'm letting him know when I'm submitting it so that he can actually be proactive and call to speak to that listing agent before they ever have to call him. And sometimes that usually means he's leaving a message because I'm still on the phone with them, or they're busy talking to their clients or something else along those lines. But that drives home the point that we're a team that's here that's committed to getting to the finish line. And we know what we're doing. We're professionals, and we're going to make sure that everything is taken care of. All the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and that we're big communicators on that too. Because these are huge transactions, and you don't want somebody who's just going to ghost you out there as well.
Gosh, I mean, you'd be surprised too. I mean, I hear stories about, just people just disappearing in those situations, right? I mean, all of a sudden Friday at 4 o'clock hits and you can't get a hold of your lender. And if your lender's not making calls to listing agents, you should really reconsider somebody else, because that is huge, right? I mean, and especially from the agent's perspective, you guys are out there looking at houses on the weekends most of the time. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that's because a lot of people aren't working then. And all of a sudden you've put in 2, 3, 4, whatever hours it is, showing houses, and they're ready on a Saturday afternoon, and you're ready to submit an offer and the lender's nowhere to be found. And that's just that is frustrating. And that is why I stay available, is because the last thing I want to do to you or to our clients is hinder this process. And that does. I mean, I have seen it. I have heard it personally from listing agents after the fact. We submit an offer, I give them a call. A lot, like to your point, a lot of times they don't even answer. And but I leave them a voicemail. I even follow up with an email sometimes, just saying, "Hey, left you a voicemail. Here's my information. If you need anything, give me a call." And after the fact, they'll give me a call after we already went under contract. And they're like, "Hey, really appreciate it. Just so you know, we had three other offers exactly the same as yours. One was even a little bit higher, but we went with yours because you were the only lender we heard from." And that happens, and
Yep.
it's pretty interesting, especially kind of going back to what we mentioned before with the COVID market we had and the lack of inventory that we did have and still do have. We're up 100%, I think, for the state of Colorado, but that's like instead of 0.8 months of inventory, it's like 0.1, 0.6 months or something like that. It's 100% up, but it's still not enough.
Yeah.
So coming from that time, I mean, it's unacceptable anymore at this
It is.
point, and you're gonna find yourself with some very unhappy clients and real estate agents if you're not available on the weekends, which is honestly why I just hand my cell phone number out to everybody because it just makes it easier. So for everyone, including myself, I mean, why have a work phone anymore? And that's the whole reason I went into where I'm at now, is because now I don't have to operate with just those banking hours. It's just it's so much better. So yeah, great point.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's, and we spend a lot of time on that because that's the foundation of a buyer going out and being able to look at a home and actually be able to confidently know that they can make an offer on the financial side. On the different side of that, when I'm doing buyer consultations, I'm doing a lot of listening and just asking a lot of questions because I want to know what is driving you, number one, to buying a home, what your primary motivators are, what are your must haves and your wish list on that as well. Because when we get down to the just the grassroots of everything, when we start looking at homes, more than likely, not every home is going to have every single thing that you want in a home. And there's going to be some compromise here or there. That's why it's important to know, okay, my must haves, I have to have a 3 bedroom. I have to have at least 2 bathrooms because I don't want to share the bathroom with my kids. And there are something along those lines that kind of comes up. Those are easy must haves. Whereas potentially having a view sometimes, I mean, it would be a like to. And if it's a must have, just know and understand what you're doing is shrinking that pool more and more and more of the homes that are available out there. And when I'm setting up my search criteria for my buyers coming in, I like to just get just the bare basics on there so that I can start understanding through talking to them about what's popping up out there, which ones are going to work out better. And I also tell them too, I don't want to get so descriptive on there because agents are human beings as well. And I've seen it many times. And it's not hard to do. The MLS is full of check boxes. It's full of all kinds of different things on there. So if we get super descriptive on, let's just take fences for instance. Home's got to have a fence. One agent might forget to mark fence, and the home's got a fence, and you just missed out on your perfect dream home on there because we didn't have that. Whereas we can look at the photos and see very easily, hey, there's a fence that goes around this as well. So we try to stay broad based to really try to help as many properties that fit that criteria go through, and then we start really narrowing down on where they want to live. That helps a whole lot also. Because if we just put all of Colorado Springs has all types of different places that you can live, different school systems. Some parts of the southern portion are more arid, which some people love. Parts of the northern section are more forested, like up in the Black Forest area, which other people love up there too. So at least finding out exactly where you want to be, if it's close proximity to work, all those other things that come into play as well. And we start looking at scheduling showings coming out
Yeah.
there. So we've already got all the financing taken care of on that side. We know what you can afford out there based on the current interest rates. And if we have interest rates that are bouncing around, then Weston's usually very good on like, hey, this is the breadth of interest rates that we can look at this price range on, and we will confirm before we make an offer on
Yeah.
any of those as well,
Yeah.
just to make sure things are sitting where they're supposed to. But we go out and we start looking, and I talk to my folks, and I tell them there's a couple of rules that we have when we go out. Number one is you're probably going to see way more than 5 homes that you want to see in one day, because you're going to see potentially lots of homes that are just, they look awesome on there. But the problem with looking with over more than 5 homes when you're in that buyer seat, you're not going to remember that first home. You're going to have a hard time remembering that first home when you're in the fifth home. If you're looking at 10 homes that day, oh man, like everything's going to start just melding together,
Yeah.
and you're not going to remember which ones you liked, which ones you didn't. So it's super important to try to keep it manageable and then set it up on separate days so that if there is more, and then we're going to talk as we go out also. And as we're in that home, I'm watching, engaging how you feel and how you react about that phone too, that home. And if I don't see excitement on there, then I'm going to start asking probing questions. What do you not like? What do you like about it on it? Just to see where you're standing on there as well, and to see if we need to pivot and turn a different direction to make sure we're not wasting your time out there as well as a buyer
Yeah.
that's moving out there as well. And that
Yeah. And
sometimes that can take a little bit.
yeah. And, to your point, sorry to backpedal here a little bit, but you were talking about finding those non-negotiables. Um, I'll tell you something I'm seeing a lot, and this is more geared towards first time home buyers. Something I am seeing a lot is people just sit in the sidelines trying to find this perfect home for their first home that they already know they are not going to stay in.
Yep.
And if I could get all these people, you know who you are in my sphere right now, and I know you're going to end up watching this, and you know who you are. Let's go back whenever we started this process and see how much equity you've already missed out on.
Yeah.
And it's about things that just, don't get me wrong, you should have non-negotiables. And, for me, always, I'm not a real estate agent, but, things I always bring up to people is location and size. Those are two
Yeah.
things on a home you cannot change, right? I mean, depending on the type of home, maybe you could change the size a little bit, add another unit or whatever it may be, but that's not a cheap do. It takes a lot with the city. And so, when it comes to non-negotiable, make sure you have that list reasonable. And because again, we talked about this earlier, just the sheer investment it is owning a home and talking about your wealth, your future, renting, things like that. Those things, you're going to totally forget about them. You really are.
Yep.
And when we're talking about, oh, well, the kitchen needs to be at least this big, or it has to have white cabinets. These are things that can change. I mean, these are cosmetic changes. So definitely get that non-negotiable list. Try to make it as reasonable as possible. I understand there's no cheap home in Colorado anymore, right? I mean, people are spending a good amount of money and it takes a lot of their paycheck. I understand that. But at the same time, this is not your forever home, first time home buyers. It's truly not. I don't know anyone that has done a first time home buyer program with me or bought a first home and was still in it 10 years later and hadn't already moved on to their next property, was renting that one now, whatever it may be. But that is just huge. And then all of a sudden, 6 months blows by. And, for some folks that were first time home buyers a year ago, that just kept waiting, and all of a sudden rates tripled. And, then they're like, oh, well, I don't even qualify for these houses anymore. Why would I buy it all? So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, rates tripled. There's so much depth the way you just said, Weston. And I'm going to try to touch on just a couple things really quick on what you're talking about too, because I see them and I work with them, and it's heartbreaking to see somebody in there, because I heard it. I mean, you heard it during COVID. Oh, well, the market's too hot. It's crazy. It's not going to last like this. I'm just going to wait until it cools off. Well, guess what cools the market off? High interest rates.
high interest rates.
And here's the crazy thing. So I just did stats last week for a video that I did for my sphere out there for my local market update within the Colorado Springs and the Teller County area. So El Paso and Teller County, the Pikes Peak region, that portion right there. I did a year-over-year analysis of the average home sale March of 2022 during the hottest part of that market before it completely stalled in June. So this market is ramped up going. Homes are going up at 15 to 20%, sometimes depending on the home. Appreciation in a month out there. It's nuts with all kinds of offers coming in on these.
Yep.
So in that year-over-year comparison is comparison to the average price of homes in March of 2022 compared to the average price of homes within the same area in March of 2023. So we're staying in the same seasonal time frames on that. And you know what's happened? Only 5.4% depreciation. And for a new home buyer, they might think, oh, that's a lot. That is not much at all.
Oh my
That
gosh.
means the market's flatlined. When you look at the amount of difference that looks like compared to what you would have been paying back then with a high 2-3% interest rate compared to right now with a 5.4% depreciation on average and a 6.5% interest rate, that's a massive difference. Massive difference. And it's because they sat there for a year. And then just a caveat on top of this too, most first time home buyers are renting right now. How
Yep.
many of you out there have rented for 10 years in the same home? I bet
Yep.
nobody has.
Yep.
So, and you find based on what needs are of the family, you've had to move because your family's grown, your family shrunk, you've had job changes. The same thing happens with home ownership. The only difference is now you're the one that's reaping the rewards off the appreciation, not the landlord that you're
Yep.
paying on a month-to-month basis.
Yep. Yep. And to give some meat to that point you just made about the 5% depreciation, to give more perspective on that. So a year ago, rates were still in the threes. So, I mean, half of what they are today and what they've been over the last year at best, right? I mean, we saw 8.5, close to 9% there for a brief moment, and come back down since then. That's also with what sounds like double inventory that we had a year ago, and that's with also with homes now sitting on the market for 3 times the amount before, maybe
Yep.
more.
Yep.
So you have what is an even a massively different market, right? In the aspect of buyer versus seller, and interest rates being so much higher, yet 5% depreciation. I mean, that is nothing on the grand scheme of things. And we're also in what is generally a slower time of year. Things are about to get crazy again. So I'm really interested to see what happens in Q2 of this year. Because I think it's going to get interesting. I do think it's going to get real busy again. I mean, buyers are all over the place right now, still with no inventory. And like you mentioned, we're seeing already again 15 offers on homes.
Yep.
I mean, just unreal. And that's with rates still in the sixes and more inventory out there than we've seen in years. I mean, years. So, yeah, just really, really crazy stuff out there. Well, James, I really appreciate your time today. You're awesome. Again, that is a lot of great knowledge for not only buyers, but for myself as well. So I really appreciate you.
Thanks, Weston. I always learn stuff when I'm talking to you as well. It's always an informative thing. So,
Yeah, I
and
appreciate that.
that's what it's all about is everybody learning together. Don't be that single point. Let have a team. So,
Yeah, share the wealth. I love it. I love it. Share
yeah.
that wealth of knowledge, man. Well, hey, you have a great rest of your day. Try to enjoy that view you've got. I know it's going to be hard. And we'll talk soon.
All right. Sounds good, Weston.